Dialogue number 4. "Well, it's natural to resist when someone is being unreasonable," said Benedict, a man in his mid-30s, clad in a bulky sweater and jeans. "I have a mother-in-law from hell." The other participants laughed appreciatively. Benedict grinned, then continued. "As you advise, I remind myself that the only reasons to get upset with someone else are expectations of approval or control. In other words, I get that my expectations are in conflict with what is, but when Ma-in-law wheels into our life spewing animosity, I resist her." "Hey, Benedict, I do too. I catch myself faster these days. I'm better than I used to be, but I'm not at the point of having transcended all resistance. Knowing assertiveness training techniques helps, and having a bottom line is of value. To me, that's self-esteem. Don't do anything that will cause you to lose your self-esteem. But let's look at resistance from a karmic perspective as a universal law," I continued. "What you resist, you draw to you, and you will perpetuate its influence upon your life. Resistance is fear, so it's something you need to karmically resolve. The law of resistance assures that you will eventually let go of the fear by encountering it until you are forced to deal with it by learning conscious detachment." "So I'm learning," he said. "Well, conscious detachment will allow negativity to flow through you without affecting you. If you don't learn it in this life, you can always reincarnate with old Ma-in-law in your next one." "Oh my God, I'm learning. Okay. The next article from Master of Life, issue 40, is titled, Encounters with Fear. Dialogue number 1. "I have a sexual conflict with my husband," Marlene said during an open question-and-answer period. She was probably in her mid-30s, quite attractive, and casually dressed in muted earth tones. "During our lovemaking, I expect to be sexually satisfied. He doesn't feel he should have to go out of his way to see that I am. You say all problems are rooted in fear, but I can't relate fear to my problem." "Conflict is always based in fear and is the primary cause of emotional problems," I replied. "Conflict is a result of needing or wanting to do something that someone else, social taboos, or your own conscience keeps you from doing. You fear that your husband won't satisfy your needs or that you won't get what you're entitled to. Maybe you need to look at your husband's motivation." "His motivation? Selfishness," she said with irritation. "Well, maybe not, Marlene. Why else would he withhold from you sexually? Is there any reason he'd like to punish you?" I asked. "No," she replied hesitantly. Her eyes darted nervously around the room. Eventually she sighed and looked me in the eye. "Well, I had an affair about a year ago. He knows about it, but it wasn't any big deal at the time because he had one too. They just balanced each other out." "Then he's one of those rare men who feels that what's good for the goose is good for the gander?" I asked, smiling. "No, he's not," she immediately replied. "And when I think about it, the problem has certainly intensified in the last year. But if his purpose is to get even, how do I ever get what I need? What's done is done. I can't change the past." "You've just changed your way of looking at the problem, Marlene. That's a start. Fear is always the problem, and unconditional love is always the answer. Instead of blaming your husband, why not focus upon how to resolve his fears, which in turn may lead to the fulfillment of your needs?" Marlene nodded slowly, but remained standing looking at me. "Of course, you could change the way you're choosing to experience the situation," I said. "What do you mean, I'm choosing to experience?" she asked. "Well, you're choosing to experience your husband's refusal to get you off as a problem." "Yeah, because it is a problem," she sputtered. "Okay, be straight." I turned around to the rest of the seminar audience. "Ladies, how many of you have husbands or lovers who aren't willing to take responsibility for your orgasm?" In the ballroom of 200 people, 80% were women, and at least 75 hands raised. All right. How many of you experience this situation as a problem? About 20 women now raised their hands. Obviously, Marlene, not everyone in your situation views it as a problem. I don't get off. What am I supposed to do? Get myself off? She was now irritated at me and the other seminar participants. I didn't respond. Well, then why would I even bother to be married? I don't know, Marlene. Why did you bother to get married? Did you get married only to have a husband to provide you with regular orgasms? No. Well, are there any other benefits to marriage? Sure, of course. Are you wanting me to name them? I didn't respond, and she continued. But a husband is supposed to satisfy his wife. Supposed to? I'm beginning to get that you need to be right more than you need the orgasms, I said. The other participants laughed, and Marlene couldn't resist a smile. Well, sure, I can easily satisfy myself sexually, but I shouldn't have to. Shouldn't have to? Supposed to? Talk about expectations. Do you want to be right so much that you're willing to lose the game? I asked. Marlene shrugged her shoulders and scowled at me. If you're only willing to experience a situation from a rightness position, which generates more conflict, it seems to me that it could lead to a divorce, thus ultimately losing the game. So, I'm supposed to repress my needs? Marlene, you're not getting it. If your marriage is valuable to you for all the reasons that you haven't named, how else can you choose to experience the one area that isn't working? She didn't respond for a while. Well, maybe I could stop expecting to get to be right. I can enjoy sex for what it is. Maybe it will even get better. The other participants began clapping and whistling their approval. Well, that might be a beginning, Marlene. As we explore the concepts this weekend, I want you to apply them to your situation, and we'll continue this dialogue later. Dialogue number 2. Well, how can you get past anger? Asked Jason, a male in his late 20s, who had already disclosed to the seminar participants that he was gay and his ex-lover had tested positive for AIDS. I don't mean intellectually, but emotionally. How do you let go of the anger? His voice was pained. Well, I think it has to start with logical understanding, Jason. Just knowing that anger quickly turns into destructiveness is a pretty good place to begin. Each time you get angry, remember that you are destroying yourself. Or you could remind yourself that the only reason you became angry is from an expectation of approval or control. You wanted someone else to approve of your actions, or you wanted to control theirs, and neither is your right. My words were registering, but Jason only nodded passively. That's logical, but it doesn't help much, he said. The real problem with anger is in repressing it, I continued. Now that's an avoidance tactic, which will drive it deeper into your subconscious, where it will spread like a cancer. First, you need to intellectually understand the anger, and next, you need to experience it. Until you've totally experienced something, you can't transcend it. Well, how do I totally experience my anger? Jason asked. By expressing it. Can you express it cleanly to the person you feel angry toward? What do you mean cleanly? Without blame, without making the other person wrong. You simply express your feelings and your unmet needs. Emotional intensity is desirable, but your tone of voice must not be accusing, or it wouldn't be a clean expression of anger. But what if the other person is wrong? He asked. The human potential response is that you and you alone are responsible for what you experience. You're choosing the experience of making the other person wrong. The metaphysical response is that blame is incompatible with karma. You only experience what you karmically need to experience, so the other person is just helping you to learn. Now, my personal response is that blame is always self-pity and doesn't do anything but make matters worse. Well, what if I can't express my anger in person because I don't even know where he is? He left town. Jason's voice started to break and tears formed in the corner of his eyes. Well, it isn't absolutely necessary to express anger to anyone else to affect it. You could go off by yourself, or you could find some friends who are willing to listen. Rant and rave, make it worse, be a poor baby. Tell everybody what you think. Don't stop until you're so exhausted you feel a release. Might take a few minutes or a few hours of catharsis, but when you're done, you will have transcended the emotions. And we could start right now. How about it, Jason? Tell me about your anger. What the hell do you have to be angry about? After 15 minutes of crying, screaming, and directly getting in touch with his anger, Jason collapsed into his chair, exhausted. Before the seminar was over, he shared his sense of release with the other participants. The anger is gone. I don't feel it at all anymore. Thank you for your love and support. Dialogue number 3. I've listened to you destroy the beliefs of 3 people in this room. I don't know about them, but I came here to have my beliefs strengthened, not destroyed, said Terry, a pretty woman in her early 30s, wearing acid-wash jeans, a sweater, and a sour look. Well, you came to the wrong place, Terry. I'm only here to destroy beliefs. What? That's ridiculous. I paid $150 to have my beliefs destroyed? You're an egomaniac. Well, that's one fact and one belief. Beliefs are things you don't know, the lowest form of uncertainty. Only when you base your personal reality upon experience can you become all you're capable of being. Now, what beliefs did you want me to help you strengthen? I asked. My belief in reincarnation. How would I do that? By guiding me through past life regressions in an altered state of consciousness to explore the cause and effect of my current life. Well, now, wouldn't that be a direct experience of reincarnation? Yes, I guess it would. Oh, I see. Dialogue number 4. But you're the one who says that your beliefs are creating your reality. If you want to change your reality, change your beliefs. In fact, you create hypnosis tapes that change people's beliefs about themselves, said David, a conservatively dressed young man in his mid-20s. I do create tapes that reprogram your subconscious mind with new beliefs, and they really work, I replied. Then how can you talk to us about how beliefs are invalid? Well, if you use a tape that tells your subconscious mind that it's okay to make a great deal of money and you're receptive to monetary abundance, now that's one thing. Your conscious beliefs are quite another. Maybe you think rich people are snobs. Now that's a belief that isn't serving you. You will always live up to your self-image, and if becoming rich means you're a snob, you'll be sure to avoid riches. Or now maybe you resent rich people because they have more than you. Your belief that you should have what they have works against you because you can't become what you resent. But let's assume that you consciously think that rich people are lucky and blessed. Now that belief doesn't serve you much better. It's still something you don't know from your experience, and since you aren't rich, it automatically follows that you aren't lucky or blessed yourself. The belief will project your lack of luck and blessedness into other aspects of your life. Well, what if my belief about rich people is that I can create my own reality and be rich like them? That's better. It's still something you don't know. Only when you've experienced it can it be true for you. Well, how do I get to that point? Go for the direct experience. Don't wait around for something to happen. Do it. Karma means action. Throw away your beliefs and act. Do you personally believe in anything? David asked carefully. Nothing, I replied. Nothing? Not even intellectual and moral beliefs? No. I can make decisions about what I want to experience without basing them on belief. Beliefs destroy experience. If your experience doesn't live up to your preconceived ideas about how something is going to be, you're disappointed. The idea is to live in the now and experience what you experience. And until you experience something, you don't really know. All right. The following article, titled Conscious Detachment, ran in Master of Life magazine, issue number 32. For years, I've been talking about how your thoughts create your life. Motivational and metaphysical teachers tell their audiences, thoughts are things and they create. I've explained it over and over in great detail and frequently with illustrations and diagrams. Self-programming tapes are great examples of the concept in action. People buy and use the tapes, and the tapes work. But they don't make the connection between the power of the tape to reprogram their lives and the power of their own thoughts to reprogram their lives. It's all cause and effect. Karma. You have karma that you are destined to fulfill in this life. That's what is. But you are also creating new karma every day with your thoughts, which must precede your actions. As you go through each day, you make thousands of choices. Maybe someone insults you and you react with anger. Now your angry thoughts have created karma that must be balanced. The more you go on reacting with negativity, the larger the body of karma that you'll have to resolve. You are creating chains that lock you in bondage. There's a story about Buddha and a man who insulted him. Buddha listened to the insults very attentively, and when the man was finished, Buddha said, "Thank you." The angry man was startled and confused, and Buddha continued explaining, "I once insulted you, so I've been waiting for you. Until you came, I could not be totally free. You are the last man, and my karmic accounts are now closed. Thank you for coming. If you had waited and not come in this life, I would have had to wait until a future life. So I say thank you. To respond in any other way would only create another chain of cause and effect." We must be very aware of how we respond if we wish to avoid karmic bondage. Most of the time, I think I'm doing pretty well at developing detached mind. I've learned to think of most negative situations as opportunities and to handle them with positive action. But any time I assume that I've resolved it, something comes up to show me how far I have to go. Here's an example. A beach hotel in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, was the location of a seminar during college spring break. Our suite was on the 16th floor, and my wife, Tara, my staff, and I were taking the elevator down to the ground floor restaurant. At the 10th floor, a single male student, who had obviously been drinking, got on the elevator. He pushed the 9th floor button. When the elevator doors opened, he stepped halfway out, held the doors, and gazed for a few moments to the right, and then for a few more to the left. He then stepped back in and pushed the 8th floor button, and repeated the process. After yet another repeat on the 7th floor, he pressed the rest of the floor buttons all the way down to 1. Anger flashed within me, and in a loud, firm voice I said, "Do that again, asshole, and you're out of here." "Oh, sorry," he mumbled, remaining in his corner as we stopped at each floor on our way down. I had allowed myself to become angry to get to the ground floor a couple of minutes faster. I could have said, "Please don't do that," and detached from the anger. The result and timing would have been the same, and I would not have programmed myself negatively. Here's another example. I usually spend an afternoon each week answering mail. Most of it's enjoyable, but the editorial in one of the issues of our magazine had generated more than the usual number of negative responses. These were delegated to a file pile, but a few were extremely hateful, not only toward me, but toward Tara, who had done nothing to anyone. In response to 4 or 5 of the most hostile attacks, I responded with quickly typed brief replies like the following. "Thank you for asking to be removed from the mailing list and for the outstanding example of hate mail. It supports my assumption that those aligned with the fundamentalist right are unconcerned with truth or in maintaining the freedoms this country was founded upon. I'll use your letter in a letters column in a future issue. Your negativity can be turned into a positive force, for your communications will surely motivate some responsible people to action." My sarcastic responses quickly released the anger, but no sooner were the notes in the mail than I was giving myself the standard lecture. "Richard, You would not have become sarcastic if you hadn't had expectations of approval or control. Obviously, your expectations were in conflict with what is. It's impossible to get upset unless your expectations are in conflict with what is. And where do you get the right to expect other people to be the way you want them to be? In the elevator, in answering the hate mail, or in any situation in which negativity is allowed to surface, I am reacting with attached mind. Attached mind is allowing someone else or circumstances to disturb me. The detached reaction would be to simply witness a situation and allow it to flow through me without affecting me. And this is what I do 95% of the time. But that last 5% is a real challenge. Reacting with attached mind is reacting with unawareness. The idea is to remain fully aware at all times. I can't repress the anger because that only makes it worse. The solution is to rise above the anger by being fully aware that it is caused by expectations, and to do anything other than release it is not only useless, but harmful in the long run because it generates karmic bondage. But it isn't only angry reactions that generate this programming. Karma is created when you think, say, or do something with intent. And whatever you think, say, or do can be categorized in one of three ways: harmonious, disharmonious, or neutral. The motive, intent, and desire behind the act will determine if it programs you harmoniously or disharmoniously. Now, all of this may sound like it's more trouble than it's worth, but once you have the awareness, it becomes habitual to process yourself in regard to what you think, say, and do. It becomes as natural as looking both ways before you cross a street. Of course, sometimes I forget to look both ways before crossing a street. And I find sometimes I forget to monitor my thoughts, words, and actions. As with all my writings, I go over them with my staff members who have a strong metaphysical background. In a meeting, someone asked, "What is the karmic difference between the nice, nasty notes you just described and your rather fiery responses in the controversial questions column?" "Well, there's no anger in the responses to the questions," I replied. "Answering the questions in the column is simply part of my job. I'm to answer questions that'll interest all our readers. Some powerful points needed to be made to some of those questions, but I've added humor and I'm not attached to my responses." Someone else said, "Well, Richard, a lot of people think that you're angry in your responses to the born-again Christian fundamentalists." "Well, that's because they read my words based upon their viewpoint," I responded. "They couldn't have written what I've written without being angry. I'm certainly concerned, but I advocate only positive action. And, as I've said a number of times, when we stop questioning and speaking out against the things we feel strongly about, we give permission for our rights to be taken away." A very high percentage of the letters I've received in response to those writings have said, "I just didn't realize what was happening." You can't change what you don't recognize. So, I'm sharing awareness. There's nothing unmetaphysical about positive action. Staff member Sherry Ruger said, "Anger is a natural, healthy alert system, but I use an internal process to deal with it." She then described a 5-point process, which I interpret as follows. 1. Become aware of the disharmonious feelings and identify it as anger, anxiety, depression, and so on. Number 2. Identify the source of the feeling and clarify your part in the conflict. Are you asking for it? Do you need this learning opportunity in your life? Number 3. Separate the feeling into 2 categories: what you feel toward the other person or persons, and what you feel toward yourself for contributing to the conflict. Number 4. Express the anger in an appropriate way, attempting to resolve it with a win-win solution. If it can't be resolved, accept that what is, knowing that you've done all you can. And number 5, heal yourself by sending light or positive, loving thoughts to the other person, for in so doing you resolve the effects of negative subconscious programming. Also, continue to process yourself as to why you needed the experience in the first place. All right, let me go on. Because of my position in the New Age field, I've had the opportunity to meet and get to know many of the gurus or leaders. Quite a few of these folks have set themselves up as spiritually superior and having knowledge or unseen contacts that somehow make them special. But in every case it was soon obvious, through our association or some scandal exposed in the press, that these people were struggling to expand their awareness, just like the rest of us. He teaches best what he most needs to learn, is an old adage I've always understood, and for this reason I've never been willing to say I am a living example of my teachings. Yes, I have dedicated my life to this learning, and no, I'm not there yet either. In writing my book, Enlightenment Transcripts, I listened to hundreds of tape recordings made during the Bushido and Master of Life seminars. These are primarily dialogues between the participants and myself, and I've used 37 of the best verbal exchanges in the book to communicate what I call the Master of Life teachings. When combined with philosophical understanding, they quickly communicate some eye-opening awareness. Now, the following are some of the dialogues about conscious detachment from negativity that I didn't use in the book. They tend to look at the issues from perspectives other than those I've already shared in this article. Dialogue number 1. Mary was an attractive woman in her late 30s, dressed in trendy, casual clothes and wearing a metaphysical necklace. She had raised her hand to ask a question, and when I recognized her, she stood up and said, "You talk about detachment as one of the ways to end suffering, and it makes sense. I know you say to detach only from the negativity, not from the warmth and joy in life, but I'm a very sensitive person, and I think my sensitivity is a block to detachment." "Sensitivity doesn't block detachment, Mary," I replied. "A sensitive person is blessed with heightened awareness, while unaware people are incapable of sensitivity. Unawareness is the cause of attached mind. You need to be very aware to detach." "Well, I've gotten a lot better at detaching from the reactions of most people, but if my husband is disapproving, I always cry, and I become very upset." "Well, that's understandable. We first develop the general ability to detach, and then we must begin to work on the more difficult specific areas. One way to approach this is to find the cause of the attachment. Now, you're upset when you don't attain your husband's approval because of something that's happened in this life or a past life. Do you want to explore the cause?" "Oh, yes," she said. In the Bushido and Master of Life trainings, participants are conditioned at the beginning of the seminar to respond instantly to an altered state of consciousness suggestion. This allows me to individually regress participants back into their past in this life or into a previous incarnation. A support team member assists in the process, and the participant is often regressed standing up. In this situation, I touched Mary on the forehead, activating the programming suggestion, counted her down into the altered state, and gave her suggestions. "All right, Mary, you react with excessive emotion to disapproval from your husband, and I want you to go back into your own past to find the cause of this. Everything you feel strongly about relates back to an event or series of events that transpired in the past in this life, or in a previous incarnation. And now, I'm going to count backward from 5 to 1, and on the count of 1, very strong impressions will come in that relate to your reactions to your husband. All right, now you're going back to the cause. Number 5, number 4, number 3, number 2, number 1. You are now there, and the impressions are beginning to form. Please speak up and tell me what you perceive. What's happening?" "Well, we're in the wagon, my husband and I and our daughter. She's asleep in the back. It's a funny wagon. It only has 2 wheels, and it's being pulled by an old horse." Mary's voice was soft and hesitant. She appeared to be reliving the situation while remaining detached enough to view it as an interested observer. "Let's move forward in time until something important happens," I said. "On the count of 3, you'll be there. 1, 2, 3. We're setting up camp. The sun is almost down, but my husband is going off to hunt. I'm tending the fire, getting ready to cook dinner. It's heavily wooded here, and now I seem to be going after water. I can hear a creek in that direction, and I'm carrying a bucket." Mary fell silent for about 20 seconds and then began to tremble, becoming extremely agitated. "What's happening?" I asked. I'm running. I'm running back to the PAM. My daughter's screaming. A bear, a huge bear. Ah! Let go of this. On the count of 3, you'll be back in the present, calm and relaxed and at peace with yourself and the world and everyone in it. Number 1, 2, and 3. Mary stopped trembling, exhaled with a big sigh, and slumped, the tears running down her cheeks. I then continued calming her and directed her to move up into her higher self, where she would have total awareness of this past life. All right, now, Mary, from this detached, all-knowing level of awareness, I want you to tell me about what happened in this past life and exactly how it relates to you now. My daughter was killed by the bear, she said slowly. There was nothing I could do to save her. She'd been asleep in the back of the wagon, and I left her there to go for the water. When my husband returned, he blamed me. He said I should never have left her, that I should have stayed with her, and I might have saved her. Was your husband in that life your husband in your current incarnation? I asked. She nodded affirmatively. Okay, Mary, can you understand that your husband's disapproval triggers guilt from this past life? You aren't really responding to him, but to the terrible pain of past programming. Now that you fully understand the cause, you will be able to let go of the effect. Dialogue number 2. All this stuff about reincarnation and karma, isn't it just another religious belief? Asked David, a conservatively dressed man of about 40. I've finally broken away from the Catholic Church, and I don't need to replace one set of beliefs with another. What beliefs? I asked. Churches are mental tranquilizers to put you to sleep so you can be exploited. My teachings are a process to wake you up. I have nothing for you to join, and I have nothing for you to believe. Let's stop and look at what we've been talking about. If you detach from a negative reaction, you avoid getting upset, right? Right, he agreed. Well, that's not a belief, it's logic. It's a fact, it's what is. Detachment from negativity is a logical goal. The true basis of spirituality has little to do with the dogma most people perceive to be spirituality. True spirituality is logical, accepting others as they are, rising above blame, rising above judgment, and seeking answers within. And it's also logical that you can find freedom of the self and from the self only when you rise above your restrictive beliefs. Well, I still have a lot of doubts about metaphysical ideas, he said. I question the validity of some of the experiences people in here have been relating. Well, good, David. You're one of the wiser ones in this room. Many of these people are true believers. They believe blindly because some channel with a funny voice said it was so, or because someone wrote it in a book. Maybe it was true for the channel or the author because it was his experience, but that doesn't mean it relates to anyone else. I know some pretty loony channels and authors. Always base beliefs on personal experience, I continued. Exploring your doubts will lead you to discovery of your personal truths, and that includes God. Don't blindly believe in God. Experience the reality of God. It transcends belief. Dialogue number 3. Susan, a woman in her early 20s, stood up scowling at me. This is very confusing. I've always been told to stop doubting, have faith, and believe. And it doesn't work, Susan. All true believers have doubts. Doubt is a byproduct of belief, often covered over with esoteric mumbo-jumbo about love and light and heaven and hell. But beneath it is doubt that often builds into disillusionment. The Master of Life viewpoint is to take the problem back to its real source, desire. Desire leads to belief, which always generates doubt. You believe that when you die, you will continue to live on the other side, but you also have doubts. You're not so sure that you're ready to die to find out if your belief is what is. So you desire to live, which makes you easy prey for the priest or metaphysician. They tell you, don't worry, only your body dies and your spirit will live forever. And they quote the Bible or the Koran or Ruth Montgomery, but you still have doubt. Susan didn't respond, so I continued. Let's carry all this back to where we began, discussing conscious detachment and how, through detachment, you can end suffering and attain peace of mind. Beliefs based upon experience are one thing, but most beliefs are based upon not knowing. You think you know, you have a strong prejudice in this area, but you don't really know for sure. You just desire it to be. It follows that until you can detach from desire, you will be unable to totally detach from beliefs. But it can be done, although not right now, as we all wish things to be. Most change takes time. But what better time to start than right now? And the place to begin is within yourself. Detachment will evolve out of discovering your own truths based upon reality, which is your experience of what is. Dialogue number 4. Aren't you forgetting about faith, Richard? Asked Warren, a young man dressed in a sweater and jeans. I happen to have strong faith in my spiritual ideas. If you're talking about faith based upon belief, then it's dishonest, Warren. It is nothing but conditioning you've accepted from others. But if you mean faith as truth based upon true knowing, then I haven't forgotten a thing. All right. Now here's an article from Master of Life, issue 34, titled, The Cause of the Problem. Everyone attending my 5-day reincarnation intensive seminar was searching for answers. Many came to the seminar hoping to resolve specific problems. I had each attendee fill out a pre-seminar information sheet asking what they hoped to resolve. Now here are 9 of the responses from those sheets. 1. I'm here to find out why I have constant anxiety, which produces psychosomatic disorders. 2. I want to learn more about my relationship with my husband and children and why we play the games we do. 3. I need to find out why I can't seem to have a relationship with a man that lasts longer than 3 years. 4. I have a wanderlust feeling that doesn't coincide with my spouse's desire to establish roots. 5. Why do I block receiving money in abundance and a mate? 6. I need to be able to relate to my negative mother. I'm uncomfortable around her and I resent her. 7. Why do I continue to attract relationships that are doomed to fail? 8. I need to know about the karma between my son and myself. 9. Why, with the whole world open to me now, do I seem to have no passion and no goals? The seminar was devoted to exploring many aspects of reincarnation. On the 4th day, I conducted an extra intensive back to the cause hypnotic regression, which included many questions about resolving the fear associated with the problem and how to more rapidly resolve the karma if possible. The following are several of the participants' reactions to this regression. And we'll begin with Beverly's reaction. She said, I frequently wondered why I have such resentment of male authority. I could never see any cause. I've always had a mental block. It's like a wall. No childhood memories before the age of 5. I was put up for adoption at the age of 5, and I always remembered my father and that I loved him. And what I just found out was, she began to cry. I find out that I hated him. He took me away from my mother when I was 2, and every time I talked about her, he hurt me horribly. At this point, Beverly began crying intensely. And then another reason why I have problems with men sexually is that because he abused me sexually too. Now I know I don't have to hate myself. My mother did love me. You see, I never had any feeling about my birth mother. I never even thought about her in all my adult life. Now I know that I had put her out of my mind because the pain was terrible. It hurt so bad every time I thought about her. I saw my father physically abuse and hurt my mother. And one night he stole me away along with 2 of my brothers, and he took us to his parents in Oregon. And he wasn't the only one that hurt me. His brothers did too. I know now that it's okay to love my mother, even my adoptive mother. Obviously, from a karmic perspective, I chose an adoptive mother who was cold and uncaring. Every foster home I was in, I could relate to the woman, but I had to be perfect. I could never do anything wrong. But I was always blamed for everything that went wrong. Everything. And then the man would punish me. So I learned to shut off my emotions, my feelings for people, because if I cared about them, then they'd come and say, "Okay, now you have to leave and move somewhere else." So I shut off all my emotions for anybody because it only brought on pain and hurt. But now I know it wasn't my fault. I said, "It wasn't your fault as a child, but we need to remember that from a karmic perspective, we set everything up to be experienced just as we experience it. Obviously, it was needed learning. If you were to go back and experience why you needed to have this situation with your mother and father, I'm sure you'd find a past life cause that would explain it. We could go back to the cause of the cause of the cause of the cause in an attempt to find justice, reasonableness in our past. And the way to resolve the karmic relationship will be the same, no matter what you find. It will be love and forgiveness. To forgive your father, even though he stole you away from your mother and sexually abused you, that may be very hard to do, but it is the way to resolve the karma between the 2 of you.